Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ksenia and I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. I'm not an immigration attorney. My videos are based on publicly available information, my own experience and the experience of my subscribers. And the purpose of my channel is to give you guys the confidence to go through this process completely on your own. Today's video is a guide to completing the Form I-130 petition for alien relative, specifically for a parent of a US citizen. I already have an I-130 step-by-step guide, but that one is more so curated for marriage-based application. However, I did get a lot of requests on how to specifically fill out the Form I-130 for parents, so this is the guide for you. You can check out the other I-130 step-by-step guide for additional things such as signing into your account, actually creating the online forms in your account, etc. As you can see, I have already created 2 I-130 petitions for each parent. Say, for example, that Jill is the mother of a US citizen and Jack is the father of a US citizen, and we're going to be petitioning them at the same time. It is possible to create both applications in your account, and it is possible to submit them on the same day. So let's continue with this application. This is the same for everyone. Before you begin, they will give you a quick summary of who is the petitioner and who is a beneficiary, and they do give you a note that currently only this application I-130 is available online, and if you are planning to file, for example, the form I-485 for your parents' adjustment of status, you must send it by mail, but you will be able to get the I-130 receipt to include in that I-485 packet immediately after submitting your case online. The first question asks if anyone is assisting us with completing this application. If you have a paralegal or an attorney completing this application, then you will select yes. However, if you're filling this out on your own, then nobody is assisting you, so you can keep it as no and click next. The next section is all about you, the petitioner. So provide your current legal name. Our petitioner's name is Jane Doe. And then it asks if you used any other names since birth. We can, for example, say yes, and it will give us an option to type in any other names that we have ever used. One thing I wanted to point out is on the I-130 form, it will ask you the first name first and then the last name. And you will notice that on the paper forms, they will ask for your last name first, then first name. So don't mess them up when typing in the online application. So let's say, for example, that Jane has used another name in the past, which was her maiden name, and clicking if you have ever used any other names since birth will also trigger a new option in the evidence section later on, like this one that says proof of legal name change. If we click no, then proof of legal name change disappears. And you can add as many other names as necessary. So this doesn't ask for like nicknames and pet names. This is asking for any other names or aliases that you may have used on documents, such as in a passport. Maybe there is variations of spellings of your names. Then you can type them in here. Click next. Next, you will be asked to provide your contact information. Next, provide your current mailing address. You do not have to type in anyone's name here. This means if anyone else will be receiving mail on your behalf at your mailing address, so then just provide your current mailing address. So we obviously typed in a sample mailing address, which doesn't exist. So we will give you an option to verify your address with the USPS. But if obviously your address is typed in correctly, you probably won't receive this message. But even if you do receive this message and you know that your address is in fact written correctly, then you can just click ignore. The next question asks if our current mailing address is the same as our physical address, and if you live at this address, you will click yes. However, if, for example, here you indicated a PO box, but you actually live at a different address, then you would click no. And on the next page, you will be asked to provide the addresses where you actually reside. But let's say, for example, that we live at the current mailing address also. Click next. So here you will be asked to provide your address history for the past 5 years. You don't actually have to include the address that we just typed in if you already live at that address. You don't have to repeat it here again, and you can just add additional addresses where you have lived aside from the one that we typed on the previous page for the past 5 years. If you have lived at this address that we just typed in for the past 5 years, then on this page in the address history, you don't actually have to type in anything. However, let's say, for example, Jane lived at this address for 3 years and she lived at another address for 2 years prior to that, then we will type that address here. And once you type in that additional address, it will ask you when did you live here. So we'll say, for example, that she lived here from January 1st, 2019 to January 1st, 2021. So when we save this address, it will indicate to USCIS that from 2021 onwards, Jane then lives at this address where she's currently residing. So you will move backwards. If there's any additional addresses that you need to include, you can add as many as necessary. And you do not have to add addresses where you didn't actually reside. So for example, if you temporarily visited another country, or if you visited your parents in another country, for example, for a few months, that doesn't actually count as a residence address. You only have to type in the addresses where you actually resided. And I do get questions about, for example, what about petitioners who live overseas? What address do they actually have to type in here? If you have actually been living in another country, you have settled there, you receive mail, you work there, you study there, for example, then that would be the address of your residence. After you've completed your address history, click next. Okay, next you will be asked to provide your biographic information, provide your gender, your ethnicity, your race. You can hover over the question marks to double check which category you might fall under. Provide your height, your weight, color of your eyes, and color of your hair. Next, you will be asked to provide your employment history also for the past 5 years, and you can just go ahead and click Add Employment and type in first the name of your employer and the address of your employer. It will ask for your occupation and what dates were you employed here. So you want to start with your current employment first. So Jane has been working here for the past also 3 years, and she currently works here. So you will click this button that says I currently work here. If, for example, you are currently unemployed, then that's what you would just simply have to type in the name of your employer, unemployed, and then you could leave the rest of this blank and provide dates of your unemployment. Now save employment, and you can add as many employments as you need. And let's say, for example, that you have 2 current employers. You do have a chance to have 2 present employers. So you can add another employment, type in the name of your employer, and you can once again, if necessary, select that you currently work here if you have more than 1 jobs. And let's say, for example, that Jane was actually unemployed prior to her current employment. So we'll just type unemployed, leave the rest blank, and then we'll just say that between 2019 and 21, she was unemployed. Now, once you complete your employment history for the past 5 years, click next. Now, this is asking you for your current immigration status, and this applies to both the citizens who were born in the US or naturalized. It then asks you if you gained your LPR status through citizenship through adoption. You would say yes or no. Next, you will be asked to provide your A number. So if you were a US citizen born in the United States, you would not have an alien number, so you can just simply click I do not have an A number. If, however, for example, you have naturalized but you were an alien at some point, even if you are now a naturalized citizen, you still should be typing in your alien number here. And so let's say, for example, that was the case for Jane. She naturalized. Moving on, USCIS account number. So online account number is only given to someone who has previously filed applications online. If you have never submitted any applications online in the past, you would not have an online account number. And if you don't know what it is or you don't remember what it is, you can simply click this one. I do not have or know my online account number, which is perfectly fine. Moving on, provide your social security number. Next, provide your date of birth, your country of birth, and then provide your city or town of birth. You can click next. Next, it asks you how you obtained your US citizenship. So in our case, like we said, Jane naturalized. Have you obtained a certificate of naturalization? You will have to say yes and provide then information about the naturalization certificate, the certificate number, which is the red number on top of your naturalization certificate, and where and when it was issued, and when it was issued. Click next. Next, provide your current marital status. So let's say that Jane is married. Then if you click married, you will be asked to say how many times she has been married. So here, just provide the number of marriages you have ever had, including the current marriage. Next, you will be asked to provide the name of your current spouse. And if we say, for example, that you have never been married, then the spouse section disappears. If you are divorced or widowed, you will be asked to provide information on prior marriages. If you are separated, you still are currently legally married, so you will also have to provide the information for that spouse. You will need to provide your current spouse's legal name, where and when you got married to your current spouse. And then this question asks, when did your last marriage end? If you are currently married, then you will simply leave this blank and will not type anything here because your last marriage didn't actually end. Now you will be asked to provide the information of your parents. We're still on the petitioner portion of this application, and it doesn't matter what order you're typing them in. And please don't confuse this message that's up here, because some people think that this is asking for your parents' name at birth. It asks for your parents' legal name as the name on the birth certificate, unless it was changed after birth by legal action, such as marriage. Next, provide your parents' date of birth, their gender, and what country they were born in, and city, town of residence where your parents currently reside. So this is another question that I receive frequently is, what if my parents are visiting me in the United States and we have decided that they will apply for adjustment of status? Then you can indicate their town of residence as where they're actually residing with you right now, which would be in the United States. It won't be a mistake to indicate it here. It equally also won't be a mistake if you still indicate their current town and country of residence as the one in their home country, for example. Either of those are acceptable. Obviously, if your parents are currently still outside of the United States, then you will have to provide their town and country of residence outside of the United States. Click next. Here you're asked to provide the name of your second parent. So if you have indicated your mother, for example, already, here you would indicate your father's name. I had questions like, what if my parent is deceased? What do I do in that situation? Or what if I don't know my other parent? So here If you don't know your second parent, you can type in unknown, for example, and just leave the rest blank or fill in the information to your best ability. If your second parent is actually no longer living, then in this case, you would just write deceased. And if you are petitioning a biological parent and a step parent, for example, then in this case, you still will have to indicate the name of your biological parent unless you were, for example, legally adopted. So we're finally moving on to the information about beneficiary. And as you can see here, we got this message. This is a standard message that most applicants get when they fill out the I-130 petition. It doesn't mean that you are not eligible to file this petition. It means that you may not meet the eligibility requirements if you are not a U.S. citizen at the time of your petition. If you are a U.S. citizen, you can just ignore this message and move forward. So here you need to select the relationship the beneficiary has to you. We are petitioning for our parent, which best describes your relationship. So here, if the parent you are petitioning is your step-parent, then you will indicate it here. If, however, it is your biological parent, then you simply ignore this question and move on. Next, has anyone ever filed a petition for this beneficiary? You will select either yes or no or unknown. You will select yes if anyone has ever filed a petition I-130, I-140, or I-129F, and it's asking if has anyone else filed the petition for them. So it's asking about additional people who have petitioned for them before. Click next. You will need to provide the information about your beneficiary, and here you will type in your beneficiary's current legal name. In this I-130 is our mom, and so we will fill in her information here once again. And of course, if you're petitioning your parent, then the information about your parent will be repeated here again, simply because now we are filling out information about them as your beneficiary. If your beneficiary has ever used any other names since birth, then you may provide them here. Anytime you indicate any additional names that have been used since birth, you will be asked to provide evidence of that in the evidence portion. Now we can provide the contact information for the beneficiary with their country code and their email. Self-explanatory, click next. Now you will be asked to provide the address of the beneficiary where they live now. When it comes to typing in foreign addresses, I have seen it done both ways and it has not caused any issues. I have seen people write the address exactly as it would be written in the native language. Alternatively, you can write the address the English way and it's also going to be acceptable. But in my personal opinion, it is best to write it in a way that the people in that home country will understand best. Just to avoid confusion and misdelivery of mail, just in case. If you're doing consular process, the NVC primarily communicates by email anyway. So if you are worried about typing in this address wrong, just make sure that you do this to your best ability. It shouldn't really be an issue. If the beneficiary lives in a home without a street number or name, you simply would have to leave the address lines blank and you would only need to type in the country, the town where they live, and if the town that they live at doesn't have a postal code, you can also leave it blank. Moving on, this question asks where in the United States the beneficiary will live. So if your beneficiary is currently outside of the United States, as we've shown above, then in this place, you will type in the address where they plan to live. And in most cases, the beneficiary will most likely, at least for the first time when they arrive in the US, will live with the petitioner. If, however, for example, your beneficiary, your parents are already living with you in the United States, and in this area, for example, you write their US address, then in this subsection, you will only have to write same instead of repeating this address above. But because our address here is a foreign address, we should be indicating the United States address where they will live. Moving on to next section. What is the beneficiary address outside of the United States? And again, if, for example, here you wrote a US-based address and also here you wrote same, for example, then here you will need to provide the beneficiary's address outside the US if they have one. If you have already wrote a foreign address in the first place here, then down below you simply can leave it blank because it is the same as where they live now. You only have to write this address if it's different from where they live now. Next, provide the additional information about the beneficiary. So again, it's asking for their A number. And if your parent has never applied for any kind of immigrant visa before, nothing like that, then they simply would not have an A number. If your parent has never been to the United States, then they simply would not have an A number. Next, their online account number, same here. Most beneficiaries don't have it. Next, provide their social security number, same thing here. If your parent has never been in the United States, has never applied for a social security number, has never worked here, then you would simply click this box. They do not have a social security number. If your parents, however, have been residing in the United States after their visa overstay and they have actually applied for a social security number in the past, even if they're working without authorization, but they do have a social security number, you have to indicate it here. Provide their date of birth and then provide their country of birth. Again, you will notice that this is the same information that you provided when you filled out the petitioner's family portion. Moving on. Here, you are asked if the beneficiary has ever been in the United States. If your parents has never been to the US, then you would simply click no. However, if this parent has visited you in the past using like a tourist visa or any kind of visa, then you would say yes. Then provide their passport number. Next, it's asking for a travel document number. So typically the passport number and the travel document number are mutually exclusive. Not always, but typically they are. So if you have a passport, then you probably do not have a travel document. This is asking about, for example, a refugee travel document number, or maybe a number on your border crossing card. Or you may have both. You may have both the passport and a border crossing card. Then you would indicate that number here. But if you don't have a travel document, then you can simply leave this blank. Provide the country of issuance of that passport or travel document and the expiration date. At the time of filling out the I-130 petition, your beneficiary is not required to have a passport. However, if your beneficiary is doing consular processing, it's very important that they obtain a passport before the next stage in the process, which is when you fill out the DS-260 application, because the DS-260 application will be asking for their passport number, which you will have to provide. If, for example, your beneficiary is currently in the United States and the passport that they used for entry is expired, then this is the passport that you will type in here. So that is also a frequent question I get. If I'm in the US and my passport is expired, do I type it in here? Or do I type in a passport number that I updated with my embassy while I was still in the United States? Here you will type in the passport that was used for entry. Moving on, this question asks if the beneficiary has ever been in immigration proceedings. This question is not asking if you have ever applied for any kind of visas or anything in the past. So this is asking about proceedings like deportation, removal, immigration court. If they have never been involved in anything like that, click no. And next. So this question is asking about the beneficiary's class of admission. If your beneficiary, for example, has visited you in the past, but they already left the United States and are currently outside the US, then you can leave this entire section blank. You only need to fill this out if the beneficiary is still in the United States. You would provide their last known entry information, which you would be able to find on their I-94, which you can obtain online from the cbp.gov. Make sure that you are selecting your class of admission correctly, and again, you can find it on the I-94 arrival departure record. Click next. Now provide the employment information for the beneficiary, and here you do not have to provide the employment history, only the current employment. If your parent is retired, for example, you can write unemployed or retired. It won't be a mistake if you have to do that. And if your parent is self-employed, then you would write self-employed and provide their home address, for example, or if they have a registered business, the address of their business, for instance. If you type in unemployed, then you would not have to fill out any of this and simply provide the dates from which they became employed or unemployed in our case. Now it's asking about your beneficiary's current marital status. So in our case, let's say, for example, that Jane Doe's parents are married, and then you will have to then provide the information on your beneficiary's current marriage. So Jill Smith is married, and let's say that she has been married twice in the past, once to Jane's father and once before. Click next. So then here we will first need to provide Jane's mother's current spouse information, who just happens to be Jane's father, for example, their date of marriage, where they got married, and here it's asking when did this last marriage end. And again, obviously, because if they're still married, the marriage hasn't ended, so you can leave this blank and move on. But now we are being asked about the beneficiary's prior marriages, and this is where you can add any prior spouses. You'll be asked to provide the legal name of this prior spouse and when did this marriage actually end. And when we click save, you will see then the beneficiary's prior marriage information and the date that marriage ended. So this would be the date when the divorce was finalized if you are divorced. But some may wonder, what if, for example, this prior spouse passed away? Then the date that marriage ends would be the date they passed away. Click next. Now here you are being asked to provide that information about the beneficiary's family. You will need to list out beneficiary's spouse and children if they have any. You don't have to provide information about any prior spouses, only current spouses and all children. So let's start with spouse. This spouse's name would be, again, Jane's dad. As you can see, a lot of this information ends up being repetitive because the same people may be indicated under multiple sections. Say it's spouse and their date of birth, for example, and country of birth. Now, also don't forget to provide information about children. And again, if this is a parent petition, then there will be at least one child listed here, which is the petitioner. If there's any additional children that the beneficiary has, they will all need to be added here. And it doesn't only mean underage children, it means children of any age, and also including stepchildren. Any deceased children do not have to be included. Once this section is complete, click next. So this next section is extremely important. I will link a video in the top right corner right now, which talks about why this particular section of the application can drastically determine the course of your application. So please watch that video. You will have to answer only one of these two questions on this page. Don't leave them both blank, and also don't fill them both out. You must answer only one. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this right now is because if you fill out both of these questions, or if you leave both of these questions blank, USCIS will send you a letter which will point to this mistake and ask you to submit an additional form with an additional high fee, which also comes with an additional processing time. So you definitely don't want to make this mistake. The first question asks, at which office in the United States will the beneficiary apply for adjustment of status? So if your beneficiary is currently inside the US and you're planning for them to apply for a green card from inside the United States, if they are eligible, of course, then this is the question that you will answer. If, however, your beneficiary, your parent, is currently residing outside of the United States, then you will skip this first question altogether and will only answer this question: at which embassy or consulate will the beneficiary apply for an immigrant visa? Say in our case, Jane Doe's parents are outside the US, so this is the question that we will answer. It is always a safe bet to indicate a consulate overseas. The reason why I say that is because if you indicated that your beneficiary will apply for adjustment of status, but then something happens and they leave the country and have to then apply through a consulate, USCIS charges an additional fee and makes you fill out an additional form and wait a long time for the I-130 petition to be transferred to a consulate. If, however, it happens the other way around, where you told them that they will apply at a consulate, but then they happen to be in the US and apply for adjustment of status, you will not have to pay any additional fees. If you're still confused about this portion, I suggest to check out the video that I just mentioned and an additional video that I will once again link here as well as below, which will explain to you in a little bit more detail what I mean. But either way, if you take away one thing from this application, is to not make a mistake in this specific section. Now, another very common question that I receive is if you are allowed to indicate a consulate or an embassy that is in a different country, not the one where your beneficiary currently resides. And you absolutely can, and people have in the past indicated an embassy that they prefer. However, USCIS or the NVC has the final discretion as to where exactly to send your case for processing and interview. So if you have a preference, you can absolutely indicate it here, but they do not guarantee that this case will be accepted for processing by that embassy. Click next. The additional information section will simply ask if you, the petitioner, have ever filed a petition for anyone else. If you have ever filed a petition for the same beneficiary or a different beneficiary in the past, you will have to say yes. So if you click yes, you will then be asked to, on this page, provide the information about the beneficiary that you have petitioned in the past and provide the result of that petition. Now, one thing that I noticed during this section is that you're only given an opportunity to indicate only one prior petition. But let's say, for example, Jane petitioned multiple people in the past, maybe her spouse and her children, for example. Then in this case, you will only have a chance to provide information about one previous petition, and any additional past petitions that you have done, you will have to then submit in this section, in the additional information section. This question is asking if you are submitting separate petitions for anyone else. So here, in Jane's case, because she's petitioning both of her parents, we will add the petition for her dad. and then you will indicate your relationship to this relative, which means the petitioner's relationship to this relative. Entry. Once that is complete, click next. So this section is somewhat confusing for some people, and it's asking about the native written language of the beneficiary. It only applies to those of you whose beneficiary doesn't use Roman letters in their native language. So Roman letters are the English letters as you see on the screen right now. So Spanish, Italian, French mostly uses Roman letters. So if your beneficiary uses that kind of language, you can leave this section completely blank. If, however, your beneficiary uses a native language that is Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, Russian, then this section applies to you. You will need to upload a document with the beneficiary's name and foreign address as written in the native language. So you can either upload a document that already exists, such as a government ID, for example, or some kind of official document. You can equally just type up a document that you made yourself, where you can type in or write out the beneficiary's full name and address. Next. Now we're finally at the evidence section. So here you will be asked to provide evidence. And the evidence portion is determined by the answers that you provide in these earlier sections. So for instance, if we have selected that we're submitting this petition for a spouse, then there would be additional subsections of evidence that would appear. Same as I showed you guys earlier, if somebody has ever used a different name, then proof of legal name change will come up here. In some cases, I also wanted to point out there is a glitch. Sometimes it will ask for proof of prior marriages, even if the people in this application have never been married in the past, or only ever had one current marriage. Sometimes that option will appear here, but just keep in mind that it's a glitch and you can either ignore it or you can upload a PDF document that says the person in question has never been married. Let's talk about the evidence. So the first portion, you will have to upload proof of your US citizenship as a petitioner. So it can be either a US birth certificate if you were born in the United States, a copy of your naturalization certificate if you were naturalized, or a copy of your US passport, for example. When you uploaded it here, you will then have to select what type of document you uploaded. So in our case, Jane is a naturalized citizen, so we decided to upload her naturalization certificate, and we indicated that it is her naturalization certificate. Some people wonder if you can upload multiples, for example, a naturalization copy and a copy of a US passport. I've seen people do that in the past and they've never had issues, so you can upload those documents here. Now, upload the petitioner's birth certificate. So because we are petitioning for our mother, your only piece of evidence required in this case in terms of your relationship is only a birth certificate showing both the name of you and your parent. So let's say, for example, we uploaded two documents. One of them is the copy of an actual birth certificate, so you can select the document type here. And the second is, for example, a translation. Say if the birth certificate was in a foreign language. And just make sure that the name of your files also reflects what the file is. So I know in my case it just says sample, but for example, you can say birth certificate.pdf and then birth certificate translation.pdf, something like that. It's not required, but it's just a suggestion to keep your evidence more organized and easy to follow. So once you uploaded all the necessary documents here, you can click next. Now, because we have indicated that we used other names in the past, so either the petitioner or the beneficiary used other names in the past, here you will be asked to provide and upload additional evidence of that name change. So basically, any official document that reflects the name change. And so when it comes to filing for your father's petition, for example, you will also be asked to provide not only the birth certificate of the petitioner, but also marriage certificate of the petitioner's parent. If the petitioner was born out of wedlock, there is additional evidence that might be required of them, which you can find in the form instructions, and I also mention it in the recent video that I released on parent green cards. Once you have uploaded all the required evidence, click next, and you will be taken to this last evidence page, which is called official statement, religious, school, census records, all of that. Now, this is only applicable to you if required evidence is unavailable. So all of this evidence prior is required. If it's unavailable to you, then you may use this section to upload any kind of additional proof of that evidence that's missing. If you were able to upload all of the necessary evidence in these sections here, then you can simply ignore this subsection and click next. It will give you a message that says you should provide evidence, but it doesn't mean that you must provide evidence. You can safely ignore this if it doesn't apply to you and click next again. Now, here you are asked to provide any additional information if you wish. Like I mentioned earlier, for example, we were talking about prior petitions for anybody else. Then here you can add a response about any additional prior petitions. So for example, when you use this part of the form, you'll click on add a response, select the section to which we are referring to, and the section was other information. The page was prior petitions, and the section was what's the full name of the beneficiary. So here you can type in additional people that you have petitioned in the past. This additional information page can be used to clarify any information that you weren't able to clarify in any of these sections. The final portions of this application gives you a chance to review your petition before you submit it. If we click next, you will be taken to a summary page where you can double check all of your responses. And I highly suggest that you also either view draft snapshot or you print it just to have a record of it, because after submitting this form, you won't be able to obtain a copy of it unless you file, like, for example, a FOIA request. After you review the application and all the evidence you submitted, click next. You will then be asked to select the statement that you can read and understand English, and the very last page is where you are technically signing this application. So this would be considered your digital signature by typing in the petitioner's full name here. And after clicking next, you will then submit this application and you will be taken to a payment page, which is a separate page where you will be asked to type in the payment information, the card information, all of that. But that's pretty much it when it comes to the petition for parents. I hope that I was able to answer most of the questions or concerns that you have about this application. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, it will really help me out. If you have questions about any other steps in the process, please check out the videos and playlists on my channel, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!